with Episode 3. Mac Vittie, lead technology evangelist of F5.
Cloud native, SD-WAN, analytics, machine learning, agile development and testing, edge computing, DevOps, service management, enterprise architecture, hybrid IT, neural networks, cybersecurity, serverless, low-code, no-code, big data, integration. You're listening to the Intellex podcast, where we bridge modern and legacy technology and untangle the buzzwords to help business and IT leaders connect the dots to achieve digital transformation. Disclaimer: the perspectives expressed in this show are the independent opinions of the hosts and/or guests and do not necessarily reflect the position of Intellex or any companies mentioned here. And now, your hosts, Jason Bloomberg, Jason English.
All right. Well, welcome to another Intellex Braincast. Glad you could join us here today. We have Mac Vittie. She is the lead technology evangelist for F5. Did I get that correctly?
You got that correct. That is absolutely right.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and we've talked over the years in many different lives previously. I think I first got to know you I don't know if you were at, was it network computing or?
Yeah, don't say the other one. I still have, that adversarial view, right? So you can't say the other one. Yeah, it was network computing. Often confused with network world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both are
yes.
there today. So
yeah, I think you were one of the first actual journalists at the time who actually opened up our software and used it, which is like a foreign concept to me now. I mean, what's actually happened to the tech journalism world, or does it still exist? What do you think?
it still exists. What happened was that, right, I mean, network computing built its kind of fame and glory, if you will, on hands-on testing. So we did a lot of testing, and sure, testing software isn't as hard as testing massive network equipment. And it got so capable, we could no longer stress it out. We could no longer afford to actually do the testing we needed to do in order to provide value, right? And it just kind of fell apart. Plus software, I say it's easy. It was for me because I like to play with software. Being a developer, it was kind of a little more intuitive. But generally speaking, it expanded and it got so broad. How do you find experts in each technology area that can actually authoritatively, incredibly speak to the quality of software, to, does it do its job? It just became, overwhelming, I think, in general. So that's why we don't see a lot of hands-on testing reviews. And people are kind of like, yeah, stuff's fast enough now. We don't really need to know. That's not the big thing we want to see.
Yeah.
And the business model was advertising based, so it just didn't add up, right? You had the advertising revenues, and then you had these expensive testing efforts. And I know it wasn't just your magazine, but I've heard that across the board. All of the magazines that actually did testing, it just didn't make economic sense at some point.
Yeah, it became too capital intense, as it were, and even the shift to using like cloud didn't make sense. In all cases, it didn't provide consistent test results. How do you adjust for, well, the internet was slower for my test than it was for the other guy's test, so competitively, this is useless, right? It became a big hassle, and it just wasn't, the return on investment was not there. So now it's more about, analyzing the markets, the technology, where it fits, giving more advice, right? Being more advisors than it is hands-on testing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So what are you focusing on these days? It's kind of interesting to see how it's changed. I mean, you make the whole industry has kind of made this leap from one of kind of covering the technology itself to more of an advocacy model. So what in particular defines what a technology evangelist is today?
Wow. I always go back to Guy Kawasaki's definition way back when we started seeing evangelists, right? It's about selling an idea, right? So at least from my perspective, it's been more about promoting, the technology ideas, how you can leverage it, what it gives you, how you can use it, how it helps, how it doesn't help, right? What are the pitfalls? What should you look out for? Underlying all of that, of course, there's always here's how F5 plays in this role, right? Or can help, or what it does for that. sometimes there is no answer. Sometimes I just pontificate about things that are absolutely not really related. But that's good because those things might not seem related now, but in the future they might. I don't know if you pay attention to gaming, so I'm a gamer. And the big drama in the last month has been Apple and Epic Games. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. Today is the start of season 4, and all of the iOS players are very upset because they can't play because of this. But you can look at it that way and see, okay, kids are upset. But on the back end, what we're talking about is an attempt to break up and disrupt, right, an entire kind of model, right, the payment industry. How do you pay things? How do platforms work? How do ecosystems get built? Who gets the money? How much do you get, right? There's a lot of business model potentially being disrupted in the background from this lawsuit in this gaming industry that could spill over into software because we're all moving to that subscription model, right? To buy this thing, have this subscription. I have a store. So how does that impact, right, the future of, I don't know, anyone who wants to be on the Apple ecosystem? I don't know yet, right? We'll have to wait and watch and see it play out.
So do you think the Apple Epic battle is going to impact the enterprise software space? You have to sort of connect the dots for us there.
It depends on what model you're using, right? So the entire argument here is that Apple controls the App Store. That's the only way you can get apps onto your mobile phone, right? So if I'm an enterprise software vendor and I want to be on the Apple platform, right, I have to go through them. If I wanted to offer in-app purchases or subscriptions of different things, say feeds to information, threat feeds. Let's say that that's something that you wanted to do on a phone, right? I want my threat feeds, my alerts to come through here. I'm going to subscribe to them, and I'm going to do that through the Apple Store because it's easy. I want to make it easy for people to get this information. So suddenly now I'm paying Apple's fee, right, for in-app purchases because that's how you get those kind of feeds, right? So that has to be, you have to count that in your business model. How much overhead is it? Who am I paying? Right? How does that interaction work? If Epic is successful and right, Apple has to allow other app stores, what does that do for who can be on there? That's a new model, but also how much, right? It changes all the business models. So I think it depends on what you're actually selling or how you're selling through it. Enterprise software isn't quite there yet. We like to talk about, the App Store experience. I think we've got years before it comes, but I think it is coming just because of the ease with which you can subscribe to different software and different feeds, different content that you may want to, see on not just phones, but what about on platforms, cloud platforms, right? You're talking about an ecosystem where you're forced to go through a specific provider. Does this have ramifications outside of that for a cloud provider that says you have to go through our marketplace? I don't know, right? I'm not a legal expert. I don't even play one on the internet, so I have no idea. But, right, you can see kind of threads there that the same kind of abstraction exists in many different worlds, including enterprise software, cloud, subscriptions, that somehow this may have an impact down the road.
Yeah. Now, internal marketplaces have been around for a while. An enterprise will have some internal marketplace where people can go and download or even purchase, possibly with a chargeback, any number of different internal apps, logins to Salesforce or whatever it is. But it isn't necessarily about the device that they have, I would think. I mean, it's not like, an enterprise is going to offer Salesforce, and then if you want to use your iPhone, you have to pay Apple something. I mean, I don't think that's how they're doing it, right?
No, it's more about the platform and the ecosystem, right? The platform that you're on and how you use that and who you have to pay and what the restrictions are. What is the model around it, right? Those kind of things, right? It's like developer agreements back in the day. How did that get governed? How did it change with open source and with these platforms? It's an interesting thing, right? It kind of was like, wow, no, this could have an impact. So it's something to kind of watch and see, right? Not only if you're a gamer and you're interested, but also just from how does this potentially impact other businesses? So
Yeah.
It's all software and subscriptions. So I suspect there's something somewhere that could get disrupted because of it, depending on how it falls out.
Yeah, as we seem to move to everything's moving to cloud, right? So as we go to developer marketplaces like Atlassian has their own kind of marketplace, walled garden, right, of vendors. Then if you go to like obviously AWS marketplace is full of vendors, people are starting to buy even infrastructure on this kind of pay-per-use or as they go basis. And so I think in particular you've been part of a lot of this evolution, seeing F5 going from a very much a stalwart kind of hardware vendor in the space to where everything's completely software defined. So how have you seen that kind of market evolution go in your experience?
How do I see it go? Wow, slow. Because and that's the reality of data centers still exist and there's still hardware, so there's still capital outlay and you still have refresh cycles and those kind of things are still going to exist. It's more the value on top of it, the software pieces that start going, right, subscription very heavy. What do I put on that hardware? Now we're talking about software and subscription and that's still a very lengthy process. We all like to talk about digital transformation and, hey, you've got to change this and you've got to change that and you have to get with the game. And all the while internally, right, software vendors, hardware vendors are all struggling with that same transformation. How do we do this? Right? We built stuff that was this way and now we have to make it work that way. Right? And it's just as hard, right, for us as it is for an enterprise to suddenly pick up and go, well, I'm just going to do it all this new way. How does that, work? It's not just, we make it sound easy. Wow, you just shift your CapEx to OpEx and everything's good. It's a little more complicated than that, but, it is happening, so it's slow, right? We see cloud growth definitely, and it's continuing. Right now, thanks to the reaction to the pandemic and everything that's going on, we're seeing a whole lot of shift to SaaS, right? As fast as people can go, that's the clear winner right now. SaaS is definitely growing like gangbusters again. IaaS, I hate that word. It's so hard to say. Infrastructure as a
IaaS.
IaaS. See, now I said a naughty thing. IaaS is, right, it's growing, but not quite as fast. Right? And a lot of that is just the shift to focus on, we're going to get everything on SaaS first, then we'll come back and focus on IaaS and what needs to go there. Enterprises are not, for the most part, it's kind of amazing if you think about it, but enterprises are not young anymore, right? A lot of businesses have been out there for 20, 30, 40 years, a lot of them longer than I've been alive, and, they're still running. And so they have a lot of, people would say, baggage. But what they really have is a lot of investment in applications and what's going on. So they're not just picking those up and moving them to the cloud, but they are going through a period of, we need to modernize these, because it's really hard to hook up a COBOL app to your mobile phone directly. That just doesn't happen, right? There's always glue in between that kind of, right, get the duct tape, get the baling wire, let's make this work. And that is the life of IT. So they're going through app modernization efforts. And a lot of times that involves the cloud, because we want to put like this new modern interface. We want to have a mobile option. We want to hook up some voice stuff. We're just going to run that in the cloud. But all of the good stuff's still sitting in the data center. So it becomes an architectural problem for them, right? CIOs are really like, okay, I have to make this work. How do I do that? Because I got apps all over the place and I got all my stuff inside and I have to somehow glue it all together. And it becomes a big integration challenge for them, is how to make that work seamlessly, or at least appear to be, right, seamless. We know, from being in IT, right, nothing's seamless. There's a lot of pipes and a lot of turns and whys, but they make it work eventually.
It's interesting you mentioned IaaS, because you haven't heard that term in a little while. There's plenty of it out there, obviously, but it's virtual machine centric, right? And it has been since, the dawn of Amazon with their first cloud product, EC2. But today, the virtual machines are sort of the older way of doing things, right? Enterprises are moving to Kubernetes and serverless, also in the cloud, although Kubernetes you might also do on-prem as well. But it's a different model, right? Where it's not about virtual machines so much as they're still there, but that's not the point. So, I mean, what are you seeing in terms of the evolution of the cloud? Is IaaS going to fade away, or in favor of other technologies, or is it going to stick around and be the legacy cloud?
Legacy cloud.
Oh, legacy cloud. There you go.
Did you just come up with that?
Well, you can put legacy in front of anything.
Okay.
It's just a matter of time.
Legacy cloud. I like that. Well, we watched, right? There was Kubernetes containers has just like moved faster than just about any technology we've seen in terms of adoption in the mainstream. It just went like, yeah, let's do it. What? I mean, it's not even mature, right? We're still in like alpha beta or whatever phase that is. And it just got picked up like wildfire. So we watched IaaS, right, kind of migrate from here's our special version, and that didn't work, right? And then they've all gone, yeah, we're going to help you manage Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is clearly going to win this market. And so suddenly, right, it's all there. So as they're making that easier, I think there are a lot of people that are using cloud and Kubernetes together, right? So IaaS is becoming kind of that platform. But you're right. When I look at industry data, I still see almost half. So like in the mid 40% of companies that are building out apps in Kubernetes or containers are doing it on premises, right? Not necessarily in their own cloud, but sometimes in their own private cloud, but they are keeping it on premises. So there's a good mix. And really, if you look at Kubernetes and you look at just the container model, it just doesn't matter who provides it. I mean, it actually fulfills the promise that we had. Remember when we talked about cloud bursting? Like way back with the legacy cloud, right? Oh, you'll just be able to burst out to the cloud when you need capacity. Be a beautiful world, right? Never happened because of the size, right? And the difficulties in actually migrating a live virtual machine from one place to another. Oh, it can be done.
Yeah, but it takes 45 minutes or whatever. That's not exactly a burst. It's more of a trickle.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. But with containers, that actually becomes like more realistic. Like we could do this. Maybe it takes minutes, but it's way quicker, and we could actually do that. So, I mean, that's kind of an exciting change, because I think that will actually make cloud as appealing or more appealing, because it does become a not just a destination, but hey, this is our extra capacity. It is what they promised now, because we can do that. We don't see a lot of that yet, but I expect that will start to become something we can do. The notion of cloud arbitrage, right? Being able to run where it's most efficient financially right now also becomes more of a reality. We talked about, wouldn't that be great? Yeah, that wasn't happening either, right?
Well, now it's between Kubernetes flavors, right? Between GKS and OpenShift or whatever it is, and so the move to the cloud and the move to Kubernetes are not the same thing, because, as you say, the move to Kubernetes is often a reevaluation of on-premises. More private cloud, which is sort of now, what is private cloud when you don't talk about virtual machines? It's on-premises Kubernetes in a co-located or managed data center. And is it really a private cloud anymore? We need a new terminology.
That's true. Should we even call it cloud anymore? Does it matter? Do you need a cloud if you have, container clusters and you're basically getting the same elasticity and economy of scale that cloud promised you, and you do it in containers? I don't know. Maybe not.
And then we add edge computing to the mix. Now we can put Kubernetes at the edge, and we have the edge data centers, and that's part of the 5G rollout. So that's going to be exploding even more in the next few years. And where does that leave the cloud? I mean, is that all the cloud, or do we want to differentiate between the cloud and the edge? I don't know if there is an answer. Interested in your take.
Or serverless. I mean, what about that too? It's like, where does it end? I mean, as far as being able to burst these workloads, they're not generic anymore, right? So how do you decide what to do from here?
So what's your take on edge computing? I know F5, you'd think F5 would have an edge computing story, so I'm interested.
Yes, we have quite a bit of edge going on, right, internally. So I sit in the office of the CTO. So edge is something we generally talk about at least once a week with someone internally about projects that are going on, what we're looking at, right? We recently released basically a SmartNIC with big IP functionality right on it. Because at the edge, you are resource constrained, right? You don't have a lot of hardware, right? This could be like at the local gas station in a closet, right? That could be edge for them if they're part of a franchise, right? This is your edge. So you can't just pick up a big piece of hardware and put it in there. It's not how things are going to get done. Hence Kubernetes, right, appeal, because it's small, it's easy to deploy, remotely manageable. This is exciting. And we look at that for software pieces, of course, because we have a lot of software that can run in that kind of format, but also at, right, what are different hardware formats that might actually be amenable or that work, right? So a smart NIC, basically, I mean, it's incredible how much power is on a NIC today when you look at the actual CPU and the server piece that goes on them that's coming out. It's incredible. I mean, it is a server on a NIC. You're like, here it is right there. It's like looking at an Arduino, right? There it is.
A server on a NIC, that sort of boggles the mind, because back in the day, a NIC, a network interface card, was a card you stuck in a server. And now you're putting the server in the card that goes in the server. So it's like, well, where does this thing go if the server's on the card? Boggles the mind.
Yeah. It's actually an additional server, right? It's a server right for the NIC. So you can put
a server in the card in another server.
In another server, yeah. It's very, very recursive there. But it allows you to do a lot of, I'd say, right, more compute intense network processing right on the NIC before it ever hits the server. So you're saving those resources. So same kind of model, same kind of story when you look at it from the network, but now you're just kind of shoving it all together because edge requires different form factors and, right, better economy of scale and smaller hardware. So those are things we're looking into, right? What can you put there? What makes sense, right? Some things don't make sense, some do. And we're exploring those options, looking at just, right, what about the container side? How do you do that, right? I mean, when you deploy maybe a piece of an app out to the edge, are you still going to need load balancing? Or are you going to need some other service? If you do, then we should probably figure out how to be there and how to provide that same kind of, right, easy deployment and use and management, which is where you end up going back to SaaS and looking at, right, IaaS, right, as a, it may not, maybe the enterprise use will slow down, but I think you'll see a lot of technology vendors making a lot of use of cloud because it makes sense to put a lot more IT management as a service, right? Yeah. And that's not, you don't go to Salesforce for that. You go to something like Amazon or Google or Azure and you build your solution on top of that. So, right, it's, it's maybe just a shift in who their buyers are and who uses them more. But I think cloud is going to be, with us long enough to be called real heritage legacy. We'll just keep tacking on terms until it's indicative of how old it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, all this effort is it seems very progressive to how much we're driving new kind of business models based on what we can do. But then the other side of it, obviously, there's a big cybersecurity, an increase in the size of the attack surface, and you kind of deal with some of that on a daily basis as well, I imagine. So, what kind of concerns are you seeing out there, and how do enterprises, address that side?
Well, one of the things that we're watching is this move of attackers. It's not just the broader surface, but up the stack. Right, so it used to be we're just gonna, we're gonna do a Smurf attack, right? Now we're gonna do a DNS amplification attack. We're gonna stop your business. Now we're gonna do a DDoS attack. Now we're gonna attack your application, right? Now it's moving up to the business logic. Like we actually we were fielding a survey, and if you give incentives for a survey, you will suddenly find that attackers are like, oh really? Here's a bot. Right, and they will just keep hammering it because they want that incentive, right? That is a security threat. I mean, to the business because now somebody is getting money for just running a script. I mean, that's right. It's an attack on the business. You see different kinds of attacks on business logic, right? It's like credential stuffing, right? This is not about overwhelming you. It's about how can I get access by attacking your systems, right? At a logical layer. People who go in when Nike has a really big sale, And they have bots that watch this, go in, scoop up everything at really good prices, and then resell them on eBay, right, for more. It's a business attack. And it's really fascinating to watch that start to evolve, because how do you defend against that? Because it's not just the amount of traffic, it's who are you and what are you doing? And how are you, right, interacting with this flow that's happening well above the application? And what are you doing? How do you recognize that? Right? So those are some of the challenges that we're looking at. I mean, there's still the normal challenges that you still have to deal with. And it's not that those are new, it's that we need new ways to address them because Kubernetes and cloud and edge and everything's changing. But there are also new attacks, new forms of attacks, and that we need to start guarding against in terms of security. And, so we're really kind of digging into those as well, is how do we provide the kind of intelligence you need to stop that or recognize it in the first place? It's really hard.
Yeah, ad fraud falls in that category, and that's been going on for years. It's tricky because the advertising algorithms are complex and real time. So the attackers also have to be complex in real time, and it's this ongoing battle. I know the airlines have really had a hard time with the attackers gaming the airline pricing system, and it's tricky to guard against.
Yeah, it really is. You have to have visibility into everything, right? So you not only have to be able to see, what the application is doing, you have to be able to see right all the way down into the network. You have to be able to see the client. Then you have to start understanding, right, that relationship and what indicates this is not a real person because they're not behaving the way a real person behaves. And it's not just about mouse clicks. I mean, that's right, easy enough for bots to adjust to and scripts to be able to replicate. It's how they navigate through a flow, how long it takes, to read something, those kind of things, right? It's all of those combined. So you need the visibility and the context. Then you need to be able to analyze that in real time to be able to say, that's not right. You need to stop that. Mm-hmm. So it's a really complex problem that's just, right? You've got a lot of space to cover and a lot of different ways you have to kind of think to get a hold of all of those bits of data to pull it together to make sense.
This has been very interesting, Lori. So is there anything else that's of particular interest right now that you're kind of following or something new you're looking at these days?
Something new I'm looking at. Wow.
Yeah, you've already named several, so I don't know.
Yeah.
5G, what do you think of 5G?
Yeah.
Not just faster phones, but for the enterprise.
I think it's one better than 4G. Is there 4G? Now you stepped into a space that I rarely go into other than
okay.
Yeah, we have a significant effort that deals with service providers, of course, right? We have a lot of technology that's specifically for service providers. I mean, working with 5G, they've got a whole effort going on, and I know that much. I know that the better bandwidth, right, faster, is really critical because edge is going to require it or force it, depends on which side of the fence you're on, but also just work from anywhere, right? This is the number of kids who are doing online learning right now. We don't know how long that kind of a model is going to last, how much of this is significantly permanent. Everybody likes to say, well, this is the new normal. I'm like, what is this? Because we don't know yet. Everything keeps changing day to day. But we do know a lot of people are going to continue to work from not just home, but anywhere. Right? I work from multiple places, from my office here in the basement to my my mother-in-law's in Cincinnati. It doesn't really matter because we have Zoom and we have hopefully 5G. So you get that you get better connections. Hopefully Zoom is a little bit more stable over it. I don't know if anybody else has those problems, but people are constantly just it's falling off. It's having problems because it's just so saturated. So. I hope it's a good thing. I try not to look at it. My new passion right now is looking into more on the analytics and visibility and how that's evolving. Right, visibility isn't enough. Now we're looking at observability and how does that flow into operability? How do we get people there? Right, and what are the strategic moves that IT has to make in order to actually progress in their transformation efforts? So. It's interesting because you start looking at weird things. This morning I was learning how many signals a human body sends per second. And it's a lot. It's like 11 million bits per second. You're like, wow, that's like, I need 5G inside, right? I mean, I'm not sure it can it do that? What's going on? So, it's, those kind of, I guess, higher level challenges are, what I'm trying to look at, and then how cloud fits into that. How containers fit into that. What does app modernization really mean? Because a lot of times when people say that, they're like, oh, you just put it in a container. Turns out that's not true. That's not how it works. Right? So just trying to dig into all those different things that fit together eventually to make up an entire data center. Right? Because it's not just one thing or another.
Yeah. It's in a sense, it's like the world's most complex product, right? All these pieces have to come together to build this, but it could take, it's like something that's constantly changing over the course of years. So the maintenance of the product you build. So.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way before, but you're right. Yeah. I mean, it's because everyone is unique too, right? If it wasn't, we'd all just be on SaaS everywhere. Everything would be SaaS, but we're not, because it's such a unique bunch of systems that have been built and put together that it's a product. Wow. I like that angle. Cool.
Well, this has been really great, Lori. So thanks so much for being on our show. Is there any place I should direct our listeners to go for some more information about, or something interesting to send them to right now?
That's always such a bonus question.
Well, you get a free plug. So what do you want to plug?
Yeah.
I'm just going to plug F5.com. That's that's the best I can do.
It's easy. It's easy to spell, right? F and then 5.
Easy to spell. Easy to remember. It's just right. F5.com. I and the rest of the Octo team blog out there. So we kind of give a view of how we see things coming in the future. What's new, what you're going to need to look for, what we see as, everything evolving. And then of course, right, everybody else is writing about, stuff that helps you right now. There's a good mix of content out there that has some, interesting things, plus, glitzy things, and our annual research is out there that I help drive. So I always like plugging that. State of App Services,
We'll put a link to that, definitely. So
very good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been great catching up.
Yeah.
It's been great catching up. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'll stop recording now.
Thank you for listening to the Intellix podcast. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, feel free to drop us an email at pr@intellix.com. Until next time, keep on transforming.